Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Katrina Power, and I'm the manager of the Circular Bioeconomy Cluster Southwest, based at Munster Technological University in Tralee, County Kerry. So in today's edition of our Innovation Exchange, we're going to be introducing our new carbon series. And we're going to be talking about different aspects of carbon, particularly in agriculture, but also in other applications as well. And we're joined today by some really great speakers who are going to talk about what they do in this field. And we're going to learn about applied biochar projects. We're going to learn about carbon measurement and soil testing facilities in Ireland and how that applies to agriculture and other sectors. And we're also going to hear about a new accelerator program for SMEs. And those SMEs are environmental entrepreneurs and technologists with really interesting technologies for waste and circular economy and renewable energy as well. So there's a new program available. And so I'm delighted to host this webinar today, and I really want to thank all our speakers and to you, the audience, for joining. And yeah, it's going to be really exciting. So before I begin, I'll just give you a bit of a background as to who Circular Bioeconomy Cluster Southwest is, for those of you who do not know. We are a new cluster based down in Tralee at Munster Technological University, and we are supported by Enterprise Ireland, and we were founded by the Circ Bio Research Group. And in our cluster, we work with about 25 members, and these members are ranging from businesses to state agencies, and we're working towards developing and promoting collaborative circular bioeconomy projects. And within that, we look for funding opportunities, we look at projects, and we do applied R&D. We are training and upskilling, and we have different courses for that and training opportunities. We're also creating market connections for companies who have new offerings in the market, and we're also creating tailored programs for the companies as well. The three thematic areas that we focus on at the cluster are agriculture, marine, and waste to value. And in the marine sector, we help develop bio-based products and materials from marine materials and seafood byproduct. In waste to value, we're looking to create added value from maybe materials that would have been considered waste. And so trying to figure out what's the pathway for that so we can avoid waste going to landfill. And lastly, but not least, looking at advanced projects and new product development to reduce GHG emissions in the agricultural sector as well. And so we're delighted to host our Innovation Exchange today. And so what we're going to do is we're going to hear from Michael Murphy, who's our first speaker, and he's from Southern Scientific Services based in Farnfore, County Kerry, and they're also a cluster member. And then we're going to hear from Stephen McCormack from IRBEA, and he runs the 3C project, a really interesting one about biochar and its various applications, and it's an Interreg funded project. And then we're going to hear from David Scanlon, who runs the Accelerator Green program at Resolve Partners in partnership with Bord na Móna. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to share the presentation for Michael.
You can hear?
Yeah, we can hear you. I'm just bringing up the presentation now.
Hello, everybody. Michael Murphy is my name, from Southern Scientific Services. It's a small to medium-sized company residing in Kerry, in Farnfore, and we provide scientific services to the agriculture and commercial industries across the country, particularly in the area of environmental monitoring and testing, but also in agriculture. And my talk today is on the question of monitoring and verification of carbon in the agricultural setting against the background of greenhouse gas emissions reduction and carbon sequestration. So our company, from a soil and agricultural point of view, we have about 60,000 soil samples a year, testing in Ireland for base nutrients and trace elements. We work with the state bodies, particularly Teagasc, but we also work with private agricultural consultants. So it is in that context that we are working on the question of carbon measurement, monitoring and verification. And we are anticipating the progress that will be made over the next 28 to 30 years in relation to achieving the climate action goals that have been set by both internationally, by Europe, and here at home nationally. In this context, it's no harm to look at soil, because soil is going to play a major part in what we're hoping to do nationally and internationally in terms of carbon sequestration. Apart from other major activities that are going on in terms of abatement, carbon sequestration and abatement, the agricultural sector is currently researching and anticipating what it's going to do for carbon sequestration over the next 30 years. So there's about 1,500 to 2,400 gigatons of carbon in soil across the globe. We've lost about 140 to 150 gigatons already through agriculture in the last couple of 100 years. But to bring it to local circumstances, our annual emissions are 67 megatons per year, and agriculture has a proportion of that. So it's approximately just over a third of that, but not including some forms of greenhouse gases. Okay, so the next slide, please. So the climate action has been climate change abatement has had several sets of objectives going back through the years with Kyoto and so on and so forth, and then to the Paris Accord and so on. So the targets that we have now, I suppose, really are probably the ones that we're probably most focused on these days with COP26 and that. And it's no harm to have a few simple figures that people can actually reckon with, rather than the many statistics that are out there on carbon, GHG emissions, and the consequent necessity to have carbon sequestration to reach neutrality. Well, in any case, the Paris Accord has required 55% reduction in fossil fuels by 2030, which is not so far away. And then thereafter to reach a balance completely by 2050, and we've signed up to that. So the next, all of the next actions that will happen will be with those timelines and those objectives in mind, and that neutrality to be achieved. And this is notwithstanding the fact that actually within that period of 28 years there will be increases, because we currently are actually increasing our carbon emission rates every year. So we've got to pull back those increases and then pull back to what's called the base level, which is 2018. So some of the experts say that almost 1 million hectares of land will need to be diversified from the amount of land that we do have. And there are lots of mentions of herd reduction, cattle reduction for that. We have about 5 million hectares of land, usable land in the country, 7 million hectares of land in all, but about 5 million hectares of usable land, of which the majority of that is actually given over to pasture land of different types and grades, but also we have tillage land, and then we have quite an amount of forestry. We need to, the experts have been considering what we're going to do in terms of achieving our objectives with this land that we're going to diversify. And the thinking is that 10 million tons of the drained organic soils, mainly peatlands, will be re-wetted, and 5 million tons of CO2 will be sequestered into forestry. And in fact, in passing, forestry really is the only sector that is currently sequestering carbon. The other sectors aren't really, they're net emitters of carbon. So of the 25 megatons that we emit every year, we will still have a deficit of about 10 megatons, which we will need to balance by other means. And there are very, very few locations where we can put carbon if we are to sequester it or to remove it as an emission. so grassland soil may be the options there. So you can move to the next slide, please. So and from our analysis of multiple samples over the last year, we've come to an average of about 5% carbon in soil. It's mostly organic carbon and mostly stable, but some components of it are actually unstable and can release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere by respiration on a continuous basis. Most of this carbon is in the top 10 centimeters of soil. 1 hectare of land on average is about 150 tons of carbon, or 550 tons expressed as carbon dioxide. The conversion there from carbon to carbon dioxide is 3 to 1, because carbon dioxide is 2 oxygens that you need to take into account. As I said, there's 7 million hectares of land in Ireland, of which about 5 million hectares are actually taken over by usable means of forestry, agriculture, and other uses. So adding 10 million tons of carbon on a yearly basis to land is not an easy task, because the figures just don't add up. Sequestration to carbon to ordinary agricultural land is a very slow process, 0.3 to 0.6 tons per hectare per year, which would give an equivalent of about 2.1 to 4.2 megatons per year if there was full participation over all of the land that's usable. So somehow the figures don't seem to add up there. So there needs to be other strategies investigated. You can move to the next. One of the options that may be necessary, and that is of the number of options that are available to us, is that we optimize the land base that we have, the 60% of the 5 million hectares of land that we have, and optimize it for sequestration of carbon. And the thinking out there is that, or one of the ideas that's common in the literature is that if soil is optimized, and when I say optimized, I mean optimized both physically, chemically, and biologically. Physically, soil structure, soil texture, soil porosity, bulk density, all those factors are actually put in are all improved. Biologically, that the soil biology is improved, that it has the maximum complement of organisms, both macro and micro. And then chemically, by ensuring that it is balanced from a nutrient point of view. And there are basically 2 types of nutrients. There's the basic nutrients, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, and calcium. And then there are nitrogen fractions, but then there are also trace elements, and the trace elements tend to be ignored quite a bit. So we have endeavoring to create a facility whereby we can do a soil health check, whereby both the physical, chemical, and biological aspects of soil are actually optimized to give the maximum amount of yield, and therefore the maximum amount of underground biomass, which will in turn give an optimized carbon sequestration over time. Now, unfortunately, this is contrary to what happens at the moment, because there is very little carbon sequestered in our pasture lands in Ireland as we speak. So it would require a regenerative type of approach to actually turn the soil around to actually being a major sequesterer of carbon. You can move to the next slide. So. Now, measuring carbon in soil and vegetation of all sorts, including forestry, requires a number of actual techniques. And this is where the measuring and monitoring comes into place. So the common laboratory type of method is for measuring carbon is the LECO-based method. And that's based on sampling soil cores from 4 hectares, processing the soil into 150 micrometer particle sizes, and analyzing in a dew mass type of thermal combustion furnace, which gives a carbon value, measures both TIC and TOC. It is the only ISO methodology that is well verified at the moment that's out there. But in the next slides, we will see other techniques which are also extremely useful in this endeavour of carbon sequestration and greenhouse gas abatement. So you can move to the next slide now. So that is the laboratory one. This picture shows one of the instruments that's used, which is called a LECO instrument, which measures carbon, nitrogen, and sulfur in soil, and it can handle about 250 samples a day, which is not too bad. And then the next slide shows another type of instrument that's also used for carbon measurement. These are just illustrations of the type of instrumentation that labs use for measuring carbon, and that will be extremely valuable tools over the next number of years in giving a very accurate and proper assessment of carbon sequestration in soil, both arable land, agricultural grasslands, and also in the peatlands and also in the forestry lands. So all is covered. So moving on to the next slide, then we see that there are other techniques which are also very useful, and I won't dwell too long on them, but they are the most important of these is the flux tower, which is being installed in a number of locations by Teagasc, and these are effectively net ecosystem based measurements, which measures carbon dioxide and methane and other greenhouse gases by what's called the eddy covariance system, whereby the gases rise from the ground upwards, and the instrument actually measures these gaseous emissions as they emit from the soil. So once one knows the total biomass assimilation in grassland and in soil through photosynthesis, one knows the inputs and all the inputs and the outputs. A series of models are used to actually measure net carbon storage in the soil. These are useful, expensive pieces of kit. They are out in the field all the time, so they suffer from environmental effects, noise effects, and so on and so forth. And one of the problems is that they're actually a single point data capture technique, but very, very useful nevertheless. You can move to the next slide there. Okay, so that's a picture of the field-based instrument, the flux tower, and we will have a number of those, or Teagasc will have a number of those in place over the next couple of years. These are serving one of several projects that are ongoing in research into carbon, greenhouse gas emissions, getting more accurate, more precise values for those. So we'll move on to the next one, which is the spectral field techniques, of which there are a fairly large variety, too many to go into in this short time, so I'll skip over them fairly quickly, only to say that there are basically three types really. There's those that work very close to the ground, less than 2 meters, and they use near-infrared spectroscopy and mid-infrared spectroscopy to gather up knowledge about the soil generally and vegetation on the soil, and they can measure a number of elements, including carbon. They're instruments that need to be referenced back to a laboratory fundamental method in order to calibrate them properly. The other techniques are ones that are higher than 2 meters above ground level, and they are predominantly used for vegetation analysis, and also looking at changes in leaf color and so on and so forth, and identifying basic deficiencies in vegetation and sometimes in soil as well. They have the disadvantage that the further away you move from ground level, the less precise these instruments become, and they all need verification back to, or calibration back to laboratory-based instruments. So we can move to the next slide. This is, we'll pass over this quickly, it just shows the spectrum where these techniques have their home in the light spectrum, visible light and infrared, which is quite a long range there. And the next technique is the one that uses radio waves, which is the LiDAR technique, which is the next slide. So they're both multispectral cameras and hyperspectral cameras. Multispectral cameras tend to have a number of bands of the spectrum, and hyperspectral cameras are again a more sophisticated version where they have a much greater number of bands, spectral bands to work with, and therefore pick up a lot more information. They can all see soil organic carbon at a distance, and therefore will be very useful in the years ahead when verification and measurement is to be carried out. So you can move to the next slide. And that's what a multispectral camera looks like. It's got both near infrared and also visible light emitters. These are emitters. They emit the light. The light travels through the air, strikes the surface of the target surface, which would be soil, vegetation, hedgerows, trees, wetland, bogland, upland, anything at all. But the one thing is that the further away the camera is from the surface, the less precise they become. So really, these are best used using low-flying drones and other devices. Sometimes on a surface-based device like a quad bike, they gather a phenomenal amount of data very quickly. This is how they have real advantages over the lab-based instruments. The lab-based instruments are slow, methodical, and precise. These are fast-acting, quick. They pick up a lot of data very quickly. Requires an awful lot of computing and chemometrics, and then almost always has to be calibrated back to a lab-based instrument. So you can move on to the next slide. And this is a picture of the LiDAR type of, this is a Chagask photograph taken by John Finn, or for John Finn. So this is also how LiDAR works, where it tells you the land use practices and so on. And this is used very, very widely. These are satellite pictures. So you can move on to the next one. So this is one little insertion here into the talk, and that is to do with precision. The precision, I call it the precision problem. So we can sequester up to 1 ton of carbon per year to 1 hectare of land. Soil has already, as I mentioned, 150 tons of carbon. So the problem is seeing 1 ton of extra carbon with 150 tons in storage. So the incremental addition there is only 0.67%. So can we see this value of 0.67% reliably using the technologies that we have? The answer is not really, because of the uncertainty of measurement of the technique itself and the uncertainty of measurements within the field. They all add up to a greater than 1% imprecision in the measurement, and sometimes more, maybe 2% or 3%. So can we see it after a number of years? And the answer to that is yes. So if we go to 5-year measurements, that is measuring at the reference period of 0, and then measuring in 5 years' time, will we be able to see noticeable differences? And the answer is yes. And this is true for the laboratory-based instrumentation. It's not really true for the field-based instrumentation, even though the quality of field instruments is getting much higher and the precision of chemometrics is getting better, but the precision may not be good enough to actually make serious decisions in relation to carbon sequestration in both soil and in vegetation with these instruments even after the integrated periods. So that is the precision problem that we will need to get over. However, I would put in a caveat very quickly that the field-based instruments are essential, as well as the flux towers and the lab-based instruments. They all work. When they all work in tandem with each other, we get really good pictures that would enable us to actually see the sequestration. So in conclusion then, if I hadn't mentioned it already, our targets are to get 25 megatons of CO2 out of agriculture to reach neutrality. This is going to be achieved by a small number of measures, predominantly forestry, re-wetting drained land, agricultural land and peatlands, and also the third one, which is the one I'm speaking about, which is sequestration into grassland, which is of dubious value until it's proven to be working absolutely with certainty. And there is significant evidence around the world that it does work. It works exceptionally well with multi-species grassland. It may not work with even high optimized homogeneous grassland. So there is the question of how many of the 5 million hectares of grassland will we devote to multi-species in order to achieve the high levels of sequestration that are necessary. Measurement and verification is important, as I've just said, and the best way to achieve that is by the use of all available technology for measuring and monitoring and verification, with always the recourse to the lab-based verification. The necessity also for harmonization across countries is also really a key factor in all of this, which is the final thing that I will say is that the use of flux towers and so on and so forth, once they're harmonized and standardized across all actors in this endeavor, the science and technology, the monitoring and verification technologies available are quite promising. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Michael. That was really, you're very knowledgeable, clearly, and we learned a lot. I imagine the group here, and it was really good presentation. Thank you. And we have about 47 attendees, and I'm sure they're listening very attentively on this session. And just so you know as well, Michael has a video that's available on YouTube, and I'm going to share it with the group after the webinar. And it just talks a little bit more about the soil sampling techniques that they're doing on the farms. And it's a walkthrough with a farmer and Michael just talking through that, the step-by-step process. So Michael, I'll share that afterwards if that's all right with you.
Thank you. Thanks, Katrina.
Yeah, thanks very much. All right, next up we have Stephen McCormack from IRBEA, and he runs the 3C carbon project. And so Stephen, take it away.
Thanks, Katrina. Just to confirm, you can see my slides?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. That's great. Okay. So thanks for the introduction there. Stephen McCormack is my name. I'm project executive with the Irish Bioenergy Association. Now, just a bit of background on IRBEA. So founded in 1999, we're the representative voice for the bioenergy sector here on the island of Ireland. And we're a membership organisation with a diverse range of members. So basically anyone with an interest in the bioenergy space. Now, we cover the areas of biomass, biogas, biofuels, biochar, wood fuels, and energy crops. We're also involved in policy, lobbying, and advocacy on behalf of our members in the various sectors, and we're largely funded through membership contributions, as well as a number of research and demonstration projects. Now, these include the administration of the Wood Fuel Quality Assurance Scheme, a European Innovation Partnership project looking at small on-farm biogas demonstration, a soon-to-begin Just Transition funded project looking at bioenergy business development within the Midlands region, and then finally the 3C project, which I myself am directly involved in. If you want to find out more, of course, just visit our website there at irbea.org. So 3C, first of all, it stands for Creating the Circular Carbon Economy, and it's an Interreg Northwest Europe funded program, and it sees 13 project partners spread out from the 6 participating countries, which are Germany, Belgium, France, Netherlands, Wales, and Ireland. Now, it was established to assist and support individuals, SMEs, entrepreneurs, and startups who are looking to develop innovative biochar-based products and services. And now this will be achieved through the rollout of what we're calling CC, or Circular Carbon Hubs, CC Labs, and an overarching CC network. Currently, we're running a 3C professional development course to support these biochar entrepreneurs. And it's our pilot course. So we have a diverse mix of participants already signed up, representing the agricultural community. We have foresters, we have biochar producers, we have some technology providers, we have municipalities, we've water companies, and we've even got some artisan food producers, all looking to see how they might develop their own biochar-based products, businesses, and services. Now, hopefully, we'll be running this professional development course to new entrants in the new year. And so if you're interested in that and want to find out more, you can get in touch with me. Now, it's just 3C is just the latest in a successive string of Interreg projects led by the University of Kassel in Germany. And basically, they've maybe 12 years worth of projects where they've built on the learnings of the previous project. And they've developed innovative approaches to using underutilized grasslands and biomass resources originally for the provision of bioenergy, and in more recent times for the provision of biochar and activated carbon. So they've developed what they term integrated biomass and carbon management, which is an interesting approach to biomass management. Now, while the focus of the 3C course at the moment is on the professional development course, next year we'll hopefully see more public activities, including workshops, knowledge exchange events, and hopefully a roadshow and conference event. Now that's just a little bit about the 3C project. Now we're just going to look at some of the logic behind why we're focusing on biochar production and its use. So very much a valuable material and a sector in development. And then I just thought I'd put this in here as a backdrop to today's discussion, this graphic of the so-called fast carbon cycle. Michael touched upon it, the flux between soil and atmosphere. The picture on the left, you see basically the movement of carbon between the land, the atmosphere, and the oceans. And the yellow numbers are representative of natural fluxes. The red are the human contributions in gigatons of carbon per year. And then the white numbers indicate the numbers of stored carbon. The figure there, as you see, is 2,300 gigatons in the soil carbon. And our issues, of course, around climate change arise when this store of fossil carbon is essentially burnt, put into the atmosphere, and that impacts our balance. And it's these impacts that are kind of pushing us to try and do a bit more with biomass carbon and a lot less with fossil carbon. And this is where the notion of a circular bioeconomy comes into play. And indeed, the circular bioeconomy and the circular carbon economy are they share many parallels and in many instances are complementary. So the bioeconomy operates in principles of cascading uses for a bioresource, where the most value and use can be extracted from different streams of material. So this ultimately extends the usefulness of a material or a resource. It allows for the waste from one process to potentially be used as the input for another process. It ultimately improves efficiencies of production and minimizes the amount of waste in systems. Now, it's within these systems that biochar production and use can play an integral role, and a successful and sustainable bioeconomy will rely on a healthy environment, and indeed biochar has a role to play in achieving this as well. Now, just in case any of you or your attendees aren't aware of what biochar is, I'll just give a brief overview. So in a nutshell, it's a black solid material with a really high carbon content, and it can be made from a wide variety of biomass streams. So everything from wood chip to food waste to grassy fibrous material, invasive species, and everything in between. It's the product of what is known as pyrolysis. So it's a thermal conversion process that essentially involves heating the biomass in the absence of oxygen. And it's produced in a manner similar to how charcoal might be made. Now, biochar and charcoal can be distinguished by the virtue that charcoal is typically destined for burning and for the provision of heat, whereas biochar is destined for uses any other use other than burning, so agriculture or environmental applications, for example. Now, by its nature, it's highly porous, meaning that it has a large amount of pores on the surface area, similar to a sponge. And it's often described as being recalcitrant. So what that means in effect is that as a material, it's extremely stable and it degrades very slowly over time. And it can also be variable in size and shape, and typically it can give rise to a slightly liming effect. And before I continue, I just put this slide in as well to show that there are quite a number of different parameters, techniques, and equipment choices that are suitable for making biochar. And these vary in size, in throughput, in operating temperatures, whether they're continuous or batch mode, and indeed varying levels of yield and carbon content of the biochar that's produced. I pictured just a few of the many types of kilns and retorts available and that are in use in biochar production, and these range from the low tech at the top to the high tech at the bottom. It's also worth noting that the process can give rise to large amounts of usable heat, which can and should be put to good use. So whether it's for process or district heating, for example. And just to gain an understanding of why biochar is so useful in so many different situations, I find it helps to think of it as a very stable black sponge on the microscale. And so if you were to image it using special microscopes, you can see something like the picture here in the center. And as you can see, it's full of pores, nooks and crannies. So this in effect means it has an extremely large surface area. And as a result, it can provide a really beneficial habitat for soil bacteria and fungi to colonize, for example. Another key aspect is its so-called cation exchange capacity. And this is a key property that is central to environmental and agricultural applications. And it's one that's based on charge interactions between positive and negative charges. And these properties are what leads to the retention of soil nutrients in soil amendment applications, or perhaps the removal of certain pollutants in water filtration applications. It can also bind to heavy metals, for example, and immobilize them. In fact, it can absorb to a wide variety of different substances and pollutants. Due to the thermal conversion process, it becomes extremely stable and won't degrade over time in the same way that the parent biomass material would have, whether that's through decomposition or microbial action, for instance. So what this means in effect is the carbon is stored for a very long amount of time, so anywhere between decades to hundreds and possibly thousands of years. And as a result, it can sequester carbon, assuming that the material is not combusted. And then as a rule of thumb, it's worth remembering that every unit of biochar is on average equivalent to roughly 3 units of CO2 sequestered. Now, what does that mean in effect? So a report by the IPCC in late 2018 identified 6 potential technologies that were capable of CDR, or carbon dioxide removal, the process of removing CO2 from the atmosphere. And they describe these as being the opposite of emissions, so hence the phrase negative emissions technologies. Now, there are technologies such as bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, and direct air carbon capture and storage that we see in the headlines. But the reality is they continue to see research and development and investment. And the reality is that afforestation and reforestation alongside land management techniques to increase carbon in our soils are areas where the price point is really low enough for it to be considered doable at scale. And this is where biochar steps in. And once it's produced, it has the ability to lock in carbon for decades or centuries. And if added to certain soils, it can make the soil more productive. And it can also help increase the soil carbon content. Now, some describe the process of biochar production and use as reverse coal mining, which I think is an excellent way to think about the sequestration benefits. And if you're to combine that property with many potential application scenarios, we can kind of get a sense of how valuable a material it could be. Now, it can be extremely useful as a material. My time is limited here today, so I just wanted to touch briefly upon some of the sectors it's finding uses currently. So within the agricultural sector, it's been used, for example, as a slurry additive to reduce odorous compounds and also increase the carbon content of slurry that's been land spread. It's been used as an animal feed additive to improve gut health. It's been used as a biofertilizer when mixed with other organics. And in fact, the EU organic fertilizer regulations are due to come into effect from 2022, which will allow biochar-based fertilizers onto the market in Europe. It's been used as an animal bedding. And research has shown from UCC has shown that certain types of biochar can help enhance the biogas production process within anaerobic digestion. Now, it's also finding new applications in the planting stages of forestry, and this can be especially beneficial in nutrient-poor soils. And many see biochar as forming an important part of sustainable forestry management. It can also offer valorization opportunities for fire or pest-damaged wood. It can also be added to composting, the composting process to make a carbon-rich material and also reduce nitrous emissions to the atmosphere. And also at the backdrop, as a backdrop to any of these applications, the real sort of bonus is that the carbon is being sequestered at each stage. Now, some biochars may prove suitable for the treatment of water quality. So the previous project, the tree seed project, was called Redirect, and they developed a biochar production site in Germany co-located with the town's wastewater treatment plant, where they were using green waste to produce biochar. They were being used to remove pharmaceutical residues from as a fourth polishing filter stage on the wastewater prior to discharge to the environment. Biochar has also been incorporated into soak pits and percolation areas for domestic septic tanks as a filtration medium. It's also been incorporated into suds, swales, constructed wetlands, alongside transport and housing networks in other countries. It's also showing promise in aiding in the reduction of eutrophication incidents through the use of biochar socks and booms placed in streams, ditches, ponds, and lakes. And biochar is also showing promise in remediation of heavily polluted sites, including former mines or brownfield sites, where, for example, heavy metals might give rise to concern. They can bind to these heavy metals and immobilize and preventing further loss to the environment. But they can also help in revegetation efforts and prevent further runoff from these contaminated soils to local watercourses. There's also a growing number of commercially available horticultural products that are available from all corners of the world, including Ireland. Now, for horticultural applications, biochar is better sold pre-mixed with beneficial organics and materials ranging from beneficial bacteria, seaweed blends, worm casts, mycorrhizal fungi, manures, mineral fertilizers, and even frass, insect manure, which has the added benefit of reducing susceptibility to damages by pests in the soil. Now, biochar and compost blends are also being sold as peat moss replacements. There are also liquid biochar blends, which can be applied with traditional spraying equipment. Biochar has also been used as green roof substrates and growing media. Now, an interesting point about that Bio 365, their biochar blends were taken on board the International Space Station this time last year as part of a suite of growing experiments. And then we also there, pictured on the bottom left, we have ProBioCarbon, which is made in Ireland by IRBEA members, and it's an enriched carbon feed that's made from solid olive stone biochar made in Arigna, which is then enriched with plant growth promoting bacteria, and it goes into the soil and provides a good boost to plants. But then there's the whole area of bio-based materials, which is another interesting application for biochar. So this company here called Made of Air, they're pioneering the use of biochar within construction materials, such as thermoplastics. So pictured here, we have a recently developed facade for an Audi dealership in Germany, which turns the material into an effective carbon sink. Now, these sort of applications may prove a very useful destination for biochar material that may not be suitable for use in agri or environmental applications. They combine biochar with a sugarcane binder to produce these granules that are pictured. And then these go on to be used in conventional plastic processing and production facilities. Here's another example of a German company who's also taking biochar as a raw ingredient and using it to develop a range of different product lines. Again, a form of thermoplastics containing biochar, which can be used in traditional plastic processes such as injection or rotomolding. And they're trialing everything from disposable coffee pods, eating utensils, to flower pots and pallets. And then here's another example of potential bio-based materials that are in effect carbon sinks. So this example is taken from Pureg. It's a pilot application of biochar within construction materials, so this time green tarmac or asphalt. And they've had trials carried out in a number of countries, including Austria, South Africa, and Australia. And the traditional composition of these materials would be approximately 85% gravel, 10% filler, and 5% bitumen. But apparently by swapping out just 2% of the filler material and replacing it with biochar, it has the potential to make new roads climate positive. Now, other companies are trialing making cement, plaster, and mortar products from biochar as well. And then that brings me to the relatively new concept of voluntary carbon removal marketplaces. Now, these are increasing in number, in visibility, and they're increasingly being chosen by mega corporations, the likes of Microsoft, Stripe, and Shopify as part of their decarbonization strategies and portfolios. Now, while other methodologies for verifiable carbon sinks exist within these platforms, they all have the use of biochar in common. So just very briefly, for example, Compensate, there have pilot studies underway where biochar has been added to soils in Austria, Germany, and Switzerland. Now, in this study, both the farmer and the biochar producer receive funds from the selling of these voluntary credits. And they hope to expand this pilot trial to other sites, particularly in areas where soils are nutrient poor or prone to droughts, areas where the biochar application could make a bigger impact. Pure Earths are offering corks or carbon dioxide removal certificates based on a number of different carbon sink methodologies, but biochar would appear to be their biggest offering, with numerous companies listed as suppliers. And then we have the American offering from Vera, and they offer what they term verified carbon units. Now, all these voluntary markets can help biochar production facilities add additional revenue streams for each ton of biochar produced, which might help business case stack up. Now, that brings me to my last slide. When I started working on the Redirect project, I suppose nearly 4 years ago, there was very little to no production taking place in Ireland, with the exception of a few early pioneers. But now we have a growing number of IRBEA members actively involved in the space. These range from bulk biochar producers, product developers and researchers, technology providers, as well as companies offering biochar analytics. And also, judging by the level of inquiries that I've been receiving of late, I can pretty much guarantee we'll see the number of companies increase over the coming months and years. And so that's it. Thanks for your attention. I've only just barely skimmed the surface. It is very much a developing sector. It's an exciting space to be involved in. Look, if you want to know more information or you wish to get in touch, reach me at that email address. Thanks for listening. I'll hand you over to Katrina.
Thank you very much, Stephen. A wealth of knowledge on the biochar sector there. Now we're going to hear from David Scanlon, and then we're going to have a few minutes for questions. And we've had a couple of questions come in already, and we'll address those after David's presentation. So thanks very much, David.
No problem, Katrina. Just getting the slides up. Can you see that okay?
We don't see that, no. Do you want to try again?
Yeah, give me 2 seconds. Okay, start that again. So,
If you like, David, I can share your slides if you want to run through them.
just, is that coming up there? No. Okay. Yeah, that might be better, Katrina, if that's okay.
No problem at all. Just give me a second there now.
Apologies about that.
No problem.
And this is why we send the slides in advance, right?
That's right. Yeah. All right. So just let me know when to go next, okay?
Okay, so thanks so much, Katrina, and thank you everyone for the patience there as I got started. As Katrina mentioned, my name is David Scanlon. I'm one of the founding directors with Resolve Partners, an innovation agency based in Dublin. And I'm going to spend a couple of minutes, conscious of everybody's time, talking about an opportunity around commercial scaling for innovative companies who are either already in the climate technology and renewable space or who are interested in understanding how they can, I suppose, build pathways into transitioning into those opportunities. Accelerate Green is the program that we have recently launched in partnership, as Katrina mentioned, with Bord na Móna and with the Peatlands and People project. So if you can move to the next slide, Katrina. Super. So when we set out, we sort of went to describe Accelerate Green as Ireland's first sustainability acceleration program. And I wanted to spend a couple of minutes going through, I suppose, the different terms that we're using inside in there. So we're talking about an accelerator, as I said, to explore new commercial opportunities for innovative companies. This is not an investing accelerator. So we're not putting funds into companies. And we're not taking an equity position. So it's essentially free for the companies who will be participating. And it's really, as I said, is about understanding what the opportunities are around moving into this new green or climate change economy, building paths to those commercial opportunities. So when we talk about scale and we talk about getting access to the resources and the financing necessary, we talk an awful lot about validation. So it's how do you understand what you need to validate, how you need to de-risk an opportunity so that you can internationalize into it, and doing so in a way that allows you access the really significant fundraising opportunities that are out there. So, you know, people may be aware there's a tremendous amount of private capital flowing into the sustainability space, into the impact space. And what we're trying to do is help Irish companies access that funding and get access to these new opportunities. Next slide, please, Katrina. Thanks so much. So I suppose the origins of Accelerate Green has its roots in the idea around building the economic capability and the commercial capability of Irish companies who are being sort of like driven towards the sustainability and impact space, but also coming at it with a just transition focus. So the needs was identified by, as mentioned, one of our founding partners, the Peatlands and People project, which is a European Commission funded project, alongside colleagues at Empower Eco. And one of the sort of the shared founding members of both the Peatlands and People project and the Empower Eco project was Bord na Móna. So the groundwork, I suppose, was laid by these two community representative groups who were broadly looking at the social challenges, the environmental challenges, and the commercial challenges. And Accelerate Green was conceived by Bord na Móna to address that economic and commercial development gap for Irish SMEs who are looking to scale into these new opportunities. So Bord na Móna are funding the Accelerate Green project as well, and it is being delivered through Resolve Partners, which is ourselves. So if we can go to the next slide there, Katrina. So Resolve Partners, as I said, it's the company that I co-founded. We're a partnership of entrepreneurial and innovative investors and consultants. So we have been working in the space of innovation development, market research, and technology commercialization for many decades. Most recently, the core team had been working in a fund called a fund at NDRC. So we were an early stage technology investor. We probably invested in about 100 projects over the 5 years that we were working together at that fund. So we have that deep experience of understanding what early stage technology and disruptive innovation needs to do to validate that a market opportunity exists. So how do you commercialize the disruptive technology that you're building and position it so that it can gain access to the capital it needs to grow? So, you know, between the founding partners of Resolve, the investments that we have worked with directly have raised in excess of over 60 million euros in venture capital. And we also have, you know, deep expertise of raising finance and delivering on corporate research and development. So we have expertise, I suppose, at many points of the spectrum in terms of scaling innovation and gaining access to those resources that are necessary. Thank you, Katrina. So the kind of people we work with, obviously, we you know, our most recent experience has been around working with early stage entrepreneurs, founders of businesses. But since we founded Resolve Partners, we've broadened that out, and we have deep experience now working with large multinational companies. We're also very involved in delivering, you know, entrepreneur development through New Frontiers programs and similar. And we, you know, working with Enterprise Ireland as well, looking at commercialization fund, market research and commercial validation. So it's not just entrepreneurial, but we're definitely interested in working with people who are looking to solve problems. And I suppose that speaks to the nature of who we are as Resolve Partners. We're very entrepreneurial in our own right, and we love getting our hands dirty working on the projects with the founders as well. And we're really interested in people, sorry, Katrina, just to go back to that last slide, really interested in people who are looking at what are the big trends that are shaping, you know, the different world of industry and the different world of consumer behavior, and helping founders that we work with and people that we work with translate that down into their own strategy and their own tactics. So as I said, the people that we work with, the challenges that they have are, how do you engage with that big vision? How do you make that big vision that you have for your technology, for your product, actually manifest? How do you turn that into a company that has a successful business model and that allows you then to build out teams that are going to deliver that model for you? And I suppose the important piece there is investors and employees and stakeholders aren't just interested in the technology. They're not just interested in the science. They really want to understand the full business model and the entirety of the opportunity. And for a founder or the business leader to be able to bring people with them, they need to be able to communicate that to their teams, okay? And the big piece as well that's driving us recently is around that impact-led growth. So what's really important for us is focusing on those opportunities that are, you know, delivering towards the sustainability targets or towards some other, you know, metric of impact assessment. Thanks, Katrina. So given that focus, and I suppose given the needs that we've identified with the companies that we believe could benefit from this, we've designed the Accelerate Green program structure. So it is a program. It is over a defined period of time. We'll be kicking off in Bord na Móna's Bura location early next year. So probably around January or possibly the start of February of 2022. And the program is going to focus on 8 key areas where we believe the businesses that we're looking to support need the most intervention and where we can deliver the most impact. So we've built this eight module program. It is an on-site program in the sense that we do hope to be in person, COVID allowing, but we're building it as off-site innovation, because really what we're trying to do is we're trying to create this space where a cohort of business owners can come together, be challenged by the team at Resolve Partners with our background in validating whether or not an opportunity is worth going after, and whether or not the team has the technology and the innovation capability to go after it. But also trying to build a community where the 8 to 10 founders who are going to be on the program are going to challenge each other as well. So we have a lot of experience of building cohorts through our fund or early stage fund experience, and we know how to build a fund that's complementary and can collaborate, but also that are going to be competitive and challenge each other as well. So we build this ecosystem of services around all of the teams on the program, and we bring in the entrepreneurs and the investors who have started the path or started down the path potentially ahead of these businesses, but also the domain expertise. So, you know, I'm not a climate scientist or an environmental scientist. The two previous speakers there, Stephen and Michael, obviously have in-depth knowledge of the spaces that they have developed expertise in. We'll be bringing in expert speakers who can support around access to specialist climate finance, understanding, you know, things like life cycle assessment and analysis, and also understanding how to measure and communicate on the sustainable impact of what the businesses are trying to do. So it's really about building up that whole partnership there around the people on the program. Thanks, Katrina. And obviously, at the heart of everything that we're doing is the relationship with Bord na Móna. So Bord na Móna, as both the instigator and the funder of this program, are in some ways also the role model for this, because what we're trying to highlight is the opportunities and the challenges for companies who are looking to transition into the climate solution space. Okay, so Bord na Móna obviously have been around for a very long time and have gone through a transformation to become the climate solutions company that they are now, and have that expertise, how they have the corporate muscle memory, as it were, about how to transition into a new direction. And we believe that the companies that go through the program with us will learn from that, while also being embedded within the Bord na Móna ecosystem as well. So getting access to the various business units, getting understanding of how their finance teams work, how they manage their facilities and their network as well. So it's a very commercially focused organization, and it'll be the commercial teams that are interested in working with the teams that we bring into the Accelerate Green program. Thanks, Katrina. So in terms of the filters that we're building as to who would be impacted most and benefit most by participating on this program. So as I said, taking the lead from the process that Bord na Móna have been going through, we are interested in established companies who either are already active in the climate technology space, or who are interested in transitioning into it. So, these are SMEs who may be, up and running, trading, have built some team around a product or some innovation, but understand that there is a lot of opportunity out there, but aren't sure about which direction to go. So how do you validate the many opportunities that are potentially out there for existing companies? Now, we're probably looking for about 8 to 10 teams. I suspect that the vast bulk of them will be those established SMEs. There may be some space and opportunity to bring in earlier stage companies, but those specifically early stage companies that are innovation driven and possibly even spin out companies from the academic institutions, because we're probably looking at opportunities that are based around deep intellectual property and primary research that are interested in transitioning out, but the bulk of it will be towards that established companies. And I suppose within the sustainability and impact lens, we believe there are 3 key areas that we're interested in exploring with the companies who are looking at the program. And they're very broad, and I understand they're very, a lot of people will say, well, am I in renewable energy or am I not in renewable energy? But the 3 areas, renewables, carbon reduction, and obviously Stephen was talking in great detail about those there, and we're broadly interested in anything that is in the carbon reduction space. So products that allow you to build or to transition other industries into this low carbon economy, or direct application innovation where you're, as Stephen said, sucking carbon out of the air or into the soil or whatever it happens to be. And then the third stream, I suppose, that we're interested in looking at is around waste management, the recycling space, and I suppose those aspects of waste management that feed into the circular economy. And within that, you could be talking about new materials, we could be talking about new systems, or we could be talking about software as a service that's going to help with grid optimization. It really is a very broad church of innovation that we're interested in at the moment. Just very quickly, there is the additional piece in terms of the lensing. We talked about this idea of just transition. So we're really, we're keen to ensure that, while companies don't have to necessarily be currently based in the Midlands, that there is, there is a direct connection between the economic and social development of the Midlands and those areas that are covered by the just transition and the companies that are on the program as well. So we're launched and we're live. We're talking to some very interesting companies at the moment, and we think it's going to be pretty competitive to get in. So at the moment, what we're doing between now and the December 10th deadline is running this awareness campaign, of which, being on this call today is an important part. It's good to activate the various networks through the cluster that Katrina is managing, but we are going to be running a series of other events. All the details of the events that we're running and how you can engage with Resolve partners are available on the website, and the application process is on the website as well. And I suppose just to call attention to two, if you can switch the slides there, Katrina, call attention to two events that we're running in the next couple of weeks. So this Thursday at 5 p.m. on November the 4th, I'll be hosting a webinar where I'll be discussing, I suppose, the future of impact investing with two active early stage and scaling investors, Faye Walsh-Drouillard, who is the founder of Wake-Up Capital, which is a seed stage impact investment fund, and Anton Shehoff, who has experience in renewable energy financing and clean technologies. So that's going to be about 45 minutes at 5 o'clock on November the 4th, and the registration details are there. I know that Katrina is going to send around the decks afterwards so that you can get access to them. And then the second event that we've published, which is happening next Wednesday, and this is an in-person event, so anybody in the northeast of the country, this is going to be held in the Mill Enterprise Centre in Drogheda. And we're talking to the CEO of a company called X-Ocean, who have developed an unmanned surface vessel that goes out on the open seas and inspects, wind farms and rigs and infrastructure, but completely remotely, massively reducing the carbon footprint of those operations. So we'll be talking to James Ives. As I said, he's the founder of X-Ocean, and their investor, Kieran McLaughlin, who's the founding partner of Venture Wave, which is a scaling impact investment fund investing in Irish opportunities. So these are just some of the events where you can learn more about Accelerate Green, but also learn more about the areas of impact and climate technology that we believe companies who are going to be on the program will be interested in pursuing opportunities. So just final slide there, if you don't mind, Katrina. Super. So that's, as the contact details are up there again. We're absolutely keen to talk to as many people, business owners, early stage entrepreneurs, academics who are interested in commercializing or spinning out technology, because this is the very first scaling sustainability accelerator in Ireland. We don't really know what's out there at the moment. We're learning as we're going. So if you think you might be a fit, or if you've got questions, absolutely drop us a line, hello@resolvepartners.ie, or hit the website and see if you can book in a session to have a chat with us directly. So thanks very much again. Sorry about the slip up with the slides at the start, and thanks for the time there, Katrina.
Thanks very much, David. And
No
just want to iterate to all the SMEs in the audience, it's a good program. Do get in touch with David if you're interested in learning more about it. It's a good opportunity. Just to ask the speakers, do you have a couple of minutes to answer a few questions? Is that all right? Yeah, because we've gone a little bit over time, but it's been very interesting. So there's a question here from Robert Johnson. With respect to biochar addition to soils, it's accepted that carbon credits are payable for the physical amount of biochar bought at a tested carbon content, and therefore the CO2 sequestered net of the other sinks. How long do you think it will take for this carbon to be detected in soil samples, as application rates could be as high as 2 tons biochar per acre? Maybe Michael, would you know, or Stephen, would you know that?
I'm not so au fait with the testing side of things, so I don't know if Michael has an answer for Robert.
Well, if it's a question just about testing on its own, the instrument that I put up the picture for there, the LECO, is a dedicated carbon measuring device. So it will measure carbon in everything, including biochar and charcoal.
Okay, great. And Robert, if you can also reach out to me as well if you have additional questions there. There's a question from Percy Foster. Hi, Percy, thanks for joining. Hi, Stephen. What scale tons per year are biochar production plants operating at in Ireland? Thanks.
So the last time I checked from our 3 bulk producers, I think the capability was there for between 30 and 40 tons per week, but that's assuming full production. So I guess you could kind of extrapolate some figures for an annual production, but about between 30 and 40 tons per week between the 3 producers. And that's only within the IRBEA members. There might be other production going on that I'm not aware of at the moment, but the ones I am aware of, about 30 to 40 tons per week being produced.
Great, thank you very much. And so I just want to close out the session. It's, we're 7 minutes over 2, which is not what was intended, but it was such an interesting session, and I certainly learned a lot, and I hope everyone did as well. And what we'll do is we'll make the presentations and the video from Michael as well from Southern Scientific Services available to you, and we'll make the recording available on YouTube as well. So thanks again to the speakers for joining today and promoting what you're doing and your excellent projects and your programs. And thanks again to all the participants for joining. Bye.
Thank you.